Hello, good evening. Welcome everybody to Network 2020's presentation on our Entrepreneurial Diplomacy Program trip to Tunisia. I am Courtney Doggart. I'm the president of Network 2020. It's actually a real exciting event to be here today to introduce you all to our Entrepreneurial Diplomacy Program. I myself have been on 2 Network 2020 Entrepreneurial Diplomacy Program trips to Turkey and to Iran, and I think it's one of the most wonderful activities that Network 2020 does. I'd also like to introduce my colleague, Filip Sasic, who will be talking today as well, and I'd like him just to introduce himself briefly.
Thank you, Courtney. I've had the pleasure of participating in 3 entrepreneurial diplomacy programs, and I'm the current managing director for Southeast Europe. Courtney, on to you. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Yes, and Filip oversees a lot of entrepreneurial diplomacy program activities. So really quickly, just to give you a sense of what we'll be talking about tonight, we'll be running through some foundational and detailed points about Network 2020's Entrepreneurial Diplomacy Program in Tunisia, as well as diplomacy program in general. So for those of you who are joining us for the first time, Network 2020, I'll just explain a little bit about who we are. So we are an inclusive international community, and we're really focused on bridging the gap between the private sector and the foreign policy community. We leverage entrepreneurial, established, and emerging leaders to highlight and drive innovative solutions to international challenges. And so what that really means is that on the one hand, we bring foreign policy expertise to our larger community of people, many of whom are in the private sector, and we do this through several of our programs. So we have our virtual briefing series, which is ongoing webinars where leading foreign policy experts cover major issues. We have our salon series, which are private in-home discussions, sort of like salons that we run in New York, and hope to get back to that very soon. We run foreign affairs discussion groups open to people worldwide. We also have a deep dive program on China. And then in addition to those more educational activities, we also try to integrate the expertise of our community into our research programs, like the Entrepreneurial Diplomacy Program. And that also, which you'll hear about tonight, and we also try to integrate that expertise into programs like our BOLD Fellowship. You'll hear a little bit more about that tonight because that is one of the follow-on activities from an entrepreneurial diplomacy program. And lastly, we have our Innovators Awards in Global Affairs. And again, that's another area where we try to tap into the resources and expertise of our larger community. So who is our larger community? We are a New York-based organization, so many of our constituents are from the New York area or from the United States. But that said, we have really a global community. We have participation in our programs from people in over 90 different countries. It's hard to say that there is a common thread, but we have people in their 20s who participate in our programs. We have people in their 90s and everyone in between. And professionally, we really are a diverse group that spans sectors. So we have people in business and finance and law and consulting and media and real estate, communications, academia, international organizations. So we're a very professionally diverse group in many ways. And so I would just say the common factor is that most of our participants are really curious individuals who want to go a few levels deeper into any given topic. And so this really provides an opportunity for them to do that. So what is entrepreneurial diplomacy? At its heart, entrepreneurial diplomacy is a qualitative research program that leverages the professional experience and curiosity of the program participants to identify and advance innovative private sector-based solutions to challenges in countries that are key to global security. What does this mean in practice? It means we try to select a diverse group of about 10 people of different backgrounds who are willing to commit to an unusual and extremely rewarding vacation experience as part of the larger entrepreneurial diplomacy program. So over the course of the 10 days, the delegates that we choose following an initial preparation will conduct interviews of leaders from across sectors and experiences in Tunisia. And that includes with government officials, business leaders, activists, and civil society, academics, youth, entrepreneurs, and others to really try to understand, in the words of those they meet, what are the challenges that are facing the country and what opportunities or solutions exist to meet those challenges. And so this slide here kind of shows a little bit about the life cycle of the Entrepreneurial Diplomacy Program. So we really start by, we poll our advisory council members. We have conversations with our wonderful members who are foreign policy experts with big picture views on global foreign policy trends. And we ask them where they think we should focus our attention for really the next 2 years. And of the conversations that we had this round, which is, at the start of 2021, the answers we had were varied and fascinating. And the only country or topic that came up multiple times was Tunisia as a really good contender for this kind of project. And so now we're really in our due diligence phase, where we, with the leadership of our 3 amazing fellows and in-country advisor, and you'll hear more about them later on in this presentation, we're really trying to understand what are some of the major themes, and we're also trying to build out the network that we need to achieve a scope of understanding that includes many different kinds of voices. And now we're also entering the project preparation phase, where we're really starting to assemble the team of delegates who will accompany the fellows to Tunisia. We hold, let me see, we're also going to hold a number of different briefings that are focused on Tunisia as preparatory briefings. And so that's also part of the project preparation phase. And then of course we get to the trip, which I mentioned earlier, which is where it's about 10 days of really intensive dawn to dusk interviews with a range of leaders in and out of Tunis and around Tunisia. Upon our return, we will have a couple of follow-up meetings to really determine the direction that we want to go in for outreach, which usually falls into one of 3 buckets: either policy advocacy, awareness raising, or program development and execution. And so one of the really unique aspects of the Entrepreneurial Diplomacy Program is that we're really open-ended about outcome. We believe it's really important to let what we hear on the ground dictate the direction in which we focus our post-trip energies. And so I think that it's an important distinction. It's one that can make things a little bit difficult, because we're not going to say, yes, this will result in a report, or yes, this will result in this kind of activity, but we're really trying to be open-ended and hear, listen to what we hear on the ground and let that figure out, let that guide, and based on the leverage points that we have, where we should go in the future with the information that we learn. So with that, our next slide, is what makes the project unique. There are a few things. So in addition to this open-ended impact that I mentioned, we're not committed to necessarily writing a report or developing a program, but there are also other factors that contribute to this program's uniqueness. We really do want to drive impact. This isn't a project that we're just going on just to learn to edify our own knowledge, but we really want to identify areas where our network can make a real impact. Another important factor is that we're really focused on listening through these trips. Our hope is that by asking good open-ended questions, we will get many different data points. And over time, once you conduct enough of these interviews, a real picture starts to emerge from these data points, much like a constellation would emerge. And so that I think is very important, just asking those questions and really letting, hearing enough answers until that picture emerges. And then lastly, the lens through which we look at this project tends to be through the role that the private sector can play, which is important just because we're based in New York, and that's largely where our networks come from. And then lastly, the group composition is largely comprised of non-Tunisia experts. So many people may be experts in their own professional expertise, which really lends a different quality to the kinds of questions we ask and to the kinds of opportunities that we might see. So that really helps make it a unique program. In terms of who can participate, I'll just run through that really quickly. Who is it for? We like to think of this program as a professionally accomplished group, and that really depends on the age and stage you are in your career. So If you're younger, you're not going to be the CEO of your company, maybe not. But we're really looking at people who are go-getters, who are curious individuals, who have the time and the money to put forward to participate in this trip. This isn't a passive experience. We really hope that everyone is actively involved. We want people to be good listeners, keen observers, because all of those details matter, and willing to take notes at meetings. And we'll cover a little bit more about expectations later on. But here you see a couple of pictures from our Southeast Europe trip. And please apologies, my dog is in the background. We're meeting with the president of Croatia at the time, and then there are some delegates who are at a post meeting debrief. So it's these are just a few of the pictures from some of our past trips. So that is who it is for. I'm going to turn it over to Filip for the next round on why Tunisia.
Thank you, Courtney. So in terms of determining why has Network 2020 decided to focus on Tunisia as part of its Entrepreneurial Diplomacy Program, from an organizational point of view, as Courtney mentioned, Network 2020's advisory council members, they really have provided an analytical assessment on the geostrategic importance of Tunisia, and as such have concluded that Tunisia is a country of both regional and global importance, and really presents a unique opportunity for a research program that Network 2020 can conduct. From a geopolitical point of view, Tunisia has received a lot of attention following the start of the Arab Spring in 2010 as both the genesis of the region-wide uprising and as one of the only success stories. However, today we see that there are several challenges that Tunisia is facing in the further development of both the socio-political and the economic landscape of the future of the country. Moving on to our structure of our Entrepreneurial Diplomacy Program, there are three main components that form the foundation of the Entrepreneurial Diplomacy Program. The first component entails the selection of fellows, selection of delegates, and preparatory, or better said, initial research and setting up meetings. These meetings that can give us somewhat of a big picture analysis of the main trends. The first component typically takes place approximately 10 months prior to the on-the-ground research. The second component, the main, is the on-the-ground research, or better said, the actual traveling to the country in focus. So during this component, we travel to several cities within the country that we have determined that really provide somewhat of a 360 understanding of what are some of the main challenges and opportunities in the country. During this time, we typically meet with various experts from various backgrounds that, again, can provide us that kind of 360-degree understanding of what are some of the main challenges and opportunities. And in particular, we try to focus on what are some of those opportunities within the private sector that can drive forward some of the challenges and solutions within Tunisia. When it comes to the specific travel dates, we're aiming to travel between May 26th and June 5th of 2022. Of course, this is going to be highly dependent upon the circumstances created by the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. And this is something that we will, of course, keep both our delegates and our network informed of. When it comes to the third component, which we perceive as really the bedrock of both delivering the findings and really trying to produce a concrete and cohesive analysis of both our findings and our research that has led up to the on-the-ground research in the country of focus. During this component, we typically develop ideas that lead to awareness-raising projects, awareness-raising meetings, and also can lead to impact-driven projects. So as we now have kind of better understood why has Network 2020 decided to focus on Tunisia, we move on to the big question here. Why would one consider wanting to become a Tunisia delegate? And what are some of the benefits of joining this delegation? And also, what are the long-term benefits for one's own professional development? Regardless of the fact if you come from the private or public sector, or if you're in your early stages or senior stages of your own career, this is a unique opportunity to develop and advance your own personal and professional skill sets. and gain an experience that matches no other. In my participation in a variety of different entrepreneurial diplomacy programs, if I can say, it really advanced my understanding of not only the countries in focus, but also of the world and how various foreign policy has created different public understanding. And the opportunity to engage in public diplomacy is such a necessary aspect that one needs to introduce in both a personal and professional setting. When it comes to some of the specific benefits, I think you really be able to enhance your understanding of what public policy actually entails. You'll be able to meet with both policy advocates in Washington, in New York, and deliver some of the findings and share your experiences with both your peers and Network 2020's larger audience. You'll be able to drive forward ideas and share experience to advance the public policy discourse related to Tunisia. Thank you, Courtney. Back to you.
Thank you, Filip. Okay, so roles and responsibilities of the delegates. I mentioned this a little bit before, or I mentioned that I would mention it. So one of the most important things is commitment. We really do ask that, especially in this day and age where I feel like it's easy to RSVP for things and then not show up. It's pretty critical that we know who is going and that they're committed to participate fully early on. And there are several reasons for this. One, just internally, it helps for planning, but more importantly, when we're reaching out to people in Tunisia for meetings, and often these are very high level people, they want to know with whom they will be meeting and why. And so we will be sending the bios of all of the delegates, of everyone who's participating. And that often is, I mean, it's an enticement for many people, because it's a great way to connect with people from the United States or from all over the world in different positions who have different expertise. And so we want to make sure that we stay as true to that group as possible from the beginning. We ask that you participate fully in any preparatory briefings. There aren't that many, but there are a few, both that will be open to the wider network when we're doing regular Tunisia briefings, but we'll also do 1 or 2 closed sessions just to prepare everyone and to make sure that you understand some of the major themes and you've got your feet under you before going. We ask that you attend all meetings for the in-country portion of the program. So that includes taking and submitting notes following the meetings. It's very important that there is full participation, that it's not just a passive experience. And the reason why we do want notes from everybody is because everyone sees different things. We all have a different way of interacting with the world. And one of you might be really focused on, what the environment is in the room that you're in and notice really important details, while someone else is, very attuned to the particular words that are coming from a speaker's mouth. And so all of those, we take all those notes, we, catalog and code them all, and that all becomes those data points that I mentioned earlier when we're really trying to create the picture of what's happening. And so it is really important that you take notes, that you submit notes. We do ask that you join and actively participate in some of the outreach activities upon return. We do have 3 amazing fellows that I'll introduce you to shortly, who will be driving a lot of that. But at the same time, as a group, it will be important to have your input in terms of what direction you think we should be going in, because you did just spend 10 days immersed in the country and in meetings, and may have opinions. And beyond that too, once the fellows really help craft the outreach strategy, you might have ideas on people to connect with or ways to implement that strategy. And so you'll be one of the first lines of offense, so to speak, in terms of implementing that strategy. And then lastly, we do ask that all the delegates cover their own international airfare and costs of the program. And so that includes the in-country travel, hotel. And so we will, and we can talk more about that later on. So that's roles and responsibilities of the delegates. And then I get to introduce you to our wonderful fellows. So we already have 3 amazing fellows. We selected them this summer through a highly competitive process. We have Leah Moshella, She really works at the intersection of education and policy, and she's a whiz in design thinking. And so she's very good at kind of thinking through programs. And again, really looking at the intersection of education and policy. We have Dario Vasquez, who's a program manager of entrepreneurship at Columbia's engineering school. And he has a lot of experience actually working with entrepreneurs in Tunisia. And then lastly, we have Pashea Numalo, and she's an intern at the Women, Peace and Security team at the International Peace Institute. And she really brings an academic approach, and really focused on the North Africa and MENA region in her studies, and takes some really interesting viewpoints in her work. So the three are a phenomenal combination. You will get to travel to Tunisia with them and get to know them better, and they're really three remarkable individuals. In addition, we have Badis Karboul, who is our in-country advisor, and so he's on the ground in Tunisia, from Tunisia. He's done projects with the U.S. Institute of Peace. He's really helping us from the nitty-gritty nuts and bolts of trying to figure out some logistical details to larger, more substantive questions, looking at how we're building out the network and who we're talking to really help make sure that we have a good 360 picture. And he's a fantastic asset to have. So we have this remarkable team that you will get to meet and travel with, and they're all wonderful individuals. So pleasure to be working with them. We're getting toward the end, so we just have a little bit left. I'm going to turn it over to Filip to talk about some of the past successes of the Entrepreneurial Diplomacy Program.
Thank you, Courtney. So moving on to the next slide, here are just a few examples of some of the visual examples of our previous entrepreneurial diplomacy trips. And one of the main aspects which we consider once designing entrepreneurial diplomacy programs as such is thinking about the potential success and what is Network 2020's impact. And to give you an example or examples of some of those success stories of our previous programs, we have in the past, we have issued and published and disseminated several reports, articles that have been widely distributed both in the United States, but also in Washington among various policymakers. We have received invitations to roundtable advocacy meetings to advance foreign policy challenges by specifically focusing and introducing private sector solutions. So we bring, if we can place it and frame it like that, we bring somewhat of a twist to various foreign policy challenges, and thinking how can the private sector really advance some of those both opportunities and utilize its own experiences from that point of view. Further on, we have participated in various advocacy meetings with policy makers in Washington that really have a unique opportunity to hear from individuals, private sector leaders typically, that see some of the different challenges and opportunities from a different point of view than those in comparison to academics and those think tanks that do conduct similar type of research. Lastly, we have successfully developed impact-driven projects. Courtney has mentioned the BOLD Fellowship already. That is an entrepreneurship development program that aims to provide young entrepreneurs in Bosnia an opportunity to engage both with their counterparts in the United States, but also to further develop their own business professional skill sets and to launch their own ventures. This fellowship directly stems from one of our entrepreneurial diplomacy programs in Southeast Europe and from one of our set of recommendations that we successfully disseminated with one of the reports that we've written for Southeast Europe. And really kind of the last slide, as we promised, moving on to just being able to share and to create some type of personal engagement with some of our previous delegates that have participated in the entrepreneurial diplomacy programs, and an opportunity for you to hear their feedback and experiences.
I've had the privilege of going on 4 trips with Network 2020, Pakistan, Iran, Turkey, and Poland. In each case, I developed a much greater understanding of the geopolitical environment of those places than I would have just reading foreign affairs or foreign policy or any one of numerous writers on the subject. There's really nothing quite like being on the ground in a place to get the bigger picture. Just as a quick example, you can read about energy problems in Pakistan, but during the course of our trip there, in almost every interview we were conducting, at some point the power would go out. And that really drove home the issues that they're facing there, the troubles that they're facing, in a way that I wouldn't have gotten had I not experienced it myself. The economic environment, sure, you can read about a country's GDP, but when you're on the streets and you see how it shakes down for the common man, that's a very different story. I can't recommend going on these trips enough. I've had the
Hi, I'm Joanna Kwaszewski and a charter member of Network 2020. In 2005, I was selected to be a delegate on the network's EDP trip to Poland. I ended up authoring a report, Poland Beyond Solidarity, on our findings from our multi-day trip there. The EDP provides an invaluable opportunity to meet and have conversations with representatives of the government, opposition parties, the legal community, the business sector, and civil society organizations. In my case, I'm of Polish heritage, and my primary interest is Russian foreign policy toward Poland and the countries of Central and Eastern Europe. My EDP experience greatly deepened my knowledge and understanding of what the most important current issues were that Poland was facing at the time. The interlocutors were very open to discussion, and having such access to them greatly enhanced my professional work. The EDP is also a great opportunity to meet with other like-minded professionals who have an interest in and curiosity about the host country, as well as international affairs in general. I think the EDP is the perfect experience for someone who wants a deeper understanding about a country's economic, political, and social priorities. It also gives the ability to have on-the-ground experience with direct access to decision makers and influential players. In addition, it exposes you to the culture, history, and people of the host country. I had a terrific experience with my EDP to Poland, and I strongly encourage others to apply to the network program.
Going on a Network 2020 Entrepreneurial Diplomacy field trip is one of the best experiences I could recommend to anybody. It's a truly immersive experience where you go and you dedicate 2 weeks of your life in understanding in depth a given country or a given region. As part of that, you really gain an immersive background of the country's history, its culture, its people, the different political currents that exist in the country, and you walk away with a deeper layer of understanding of a part of the world that hopefully you knew a little bit less about going in.
Okay, all right. With that, it is now time for questions. So we are getting some questions in the Q&A box. So thank you all for participating. If you have questions, you can put them in the Q&A box. So I'll start. I have one from Sally Timpson, who wants to know about, in arranging meetings with Tunisian leaders, how do you attract them to want to meet with us? Which is a great question, and that is, it's always a little bit of a dance, right? And that's what I mentioned earlier, why it is actually very important to have the bios of the delegates, because that is an important factor. They are often reading through those and using that to make decisions as to whether or not to meet. That said, I think the track record of what we've done in the past is also important. And Filip, you can speak to this as well, but I think often the fact that we as a network have been able to arrange meetings on Capitol Hill or in Washington, D.C. with policymakers or with business leaders in New York, or have been able to publish and disseminate reports and really get their voices heard in communities in which they would want them to be heard, has been another main reason for wanting to meet with us. And so that's a really important piece. Filip, would you want to add to that?
Yeah, just quickly, it definitely kind of validates our approach, our successes, as Courtney just mentioned, and it really aims to support the idea of public diplomacy, the opportunity for individuals, both from the public sector and the private sector, to be able to engage across the Atlantic in this case scenario, where people can actually share voices and share experiences. And it really is important for both the United States and Tunisia in this case, that both people on side can actually share their experiences and feedback when it comes to various challenges and opportunities.
Yeah, I think that's an important point is that that public diplomacy element is definitely there. It's obviously a private citizen-led initiative, but I think that there's a lot of value, and I think many of us are still in touch with contacts that we've made through past trips, and so I think that really is an important piece. We are getting questions on the total cost. So we're estimating right now, we're waiting to hear back. The estimate will probably change. Right now we're saying with a very decent buffer between $4,000 and $5,000. And that's not inclusive of international airfare, but it does include all the on-the-ground transportation, good hotel accommodations, meals, on-the-ground transportation in the country, translator interpretation services, all the planning that goes into it, the logistics. So all of that would be included in the cost. There is a healthy buffer in there, just because hotel and plane prices right now in particular, I think, are kind of hard to estimate given the COVID situation. But so we've tried to build in a pretty healthy buffer in that. Filip, the next question is on whether or not if you're selected, when would you find out? Do you want to take that one?
So one of the, if I can say, amazing opportunities is to really talk to all of the potential candidates. And in the past, what we have experienced is that we typically take on approximately 2 weeks once the application window has closed. So typically what we do is we assess and evaluate all of the applications. And then as a second phase of the selection process, we take on specific kind of one-on-one interviews with the potential candidates to determine whether they would be the right fit for the delegation. That is an additional week. So approximately 3 to 4 weeks upon the ending of the application window.
Yeah, so that'd be by the end of the year. We want to leave enough time so that people can plan their vacations too. We know that that's important, and so so that we can get planning as well. We received a question about whether one's company can cover the fee of the trip, and I just want to say yes. And actually, I did that when I went to Iran in 2014, so I was able to get my employer at the time to cover it, and it really is, I think, a wonderful way to raise awareness about the program and to alert your employer to an activity that you're engaging in that can really enhance your own professional horizons. And we would also be happy to provide a letter detailing the trip, the activities, the types of people you'd be meeting with, sort of the professional value of that as well. We have another question, Filip, I'll give this one to you. So knowing Tunisia's security situation, which is somewhat challenging, how will safety be secure? You ensure the safety of the delegates?
So in planning of the specific both travel arrangements and travel itinerary, we are really taking all preconditions and prerequisites in terms of ensuring safety, both in coordinating with recommendations from the State Department, but also with our on-the-ground liaisons. We are making as we have done in the past, we make every effort to ensure that all of our delegates not only feel safe within the environment of whether it's the hotel or whether it's the meeting, but also during the transportation between each of the cities within the country.
Thank you. And we also have a question, actually a couple of questions that are asking about eligibility. So if they're retired, are they still eligible? And do you need to be a US citizen? So I'll kind of take those together. So do you need to be a US citizen? No, we welcome people from all backgrounds. The only question that would need to be addressed prior to travel is the need for visas. And for US passport holders, just as a note, no visa is needed for stays of up to 90 days. And if you're retired, yes, you are still eligible. One does not need to be actively working to participate. And everyone, we believe, brings different personal and professional experience that will benefit the trip. Filip, would you like to take? I received a question about who is an ideal candidate.
So I think it really kind of ranges to present what type of candidates we have had in the past, whether it's someone who is early on in their career or whether it's someone who is a senior executive. It really, I think, demonstrates the value of the program. And we look for individuals, as Courtney mentioned, that are really passionate and committed and want to benefit not only the Entrepreneurial Diplomacy Program focusing on Tunisia, but as a whole, be a kind of a team player and participate with their own creative ideas in both the dissemination of information, raising awareness, and contributing with ideas on how can Network 2020 position itself to take action on some of the specific findings and recommendations from the voices of individuals that we've heard in Tunisia in developing follow-on projects that can create further tangible outcomes.
And just to tag on to that, we also have a question that's asking about whether or not will you need any written reports from the delegates upon return, and are they going to participate in any public policy projects regarding Tunisia? So as for written reports, that is not necessary. We do want everybody's notes from the meetings. That's really important. And then as for but one doesn't need to necessarily write a report. Of course, if you want to, you are welcome to, and we're happy to work with you on that and coordinate. And then participation in any public policy projects. Again, it depends sort of on the direction in which we decide to put our energies for the post-trip outreach. But there would certainly, I think, be an opportunity to participate in that in some way, shape, or form. We have a question about, let's see, would we, 10 days, does that include travel days, and can one join the group for 7 days? Filip, do you want to take that? Is it possible to join for 7 days, or, do the 10 days include travel days?
So the 10 days typically does include the travel to the country. So while I would highly recommend being able to really kind of allow yourself the time to focus on for 7 or 8 days and plan for 1 or 2 extra days for the international travel. But it is a possibility if there are some professional obligations that one of the delegates might have that will prevent them to physically be present for the entire duration of the 10 days. But that said, we always highly recommend all of our delegates to really be able to commit to the 10 days, just because once you reach day 7 and you will know that the rest of the group is going to a region that's addressing either political questions, or it might be addressing questions related to the energy sector. Those aspects are very important for each of the delegates to be able to gain a full and complete understanding of some of the main socio-political and economic challenges and trends.
Thanks, Filip. We also have a question as to whether or not for special health or personal insurance, and will we offer some sort of policy? That's a great question. I think just because people's situations are different, usually I think it would want people to get their own policies. A brief search online, I think you can get a really good travel policy insurance with medevac for 2 weeks for about $150. There's also, I think, packages you could add on to that to get, in case if you needed to be extracted in the case of civil unrest, which is, if you're going someplace where that would be a real risk, and in theory you could you could get that package as well. We have a question about whether there will be an open forum in Tunisia, whether would everyone have the option to attend all meetings? Okay, that's a great question. I think it depends really on the composition of the overall group. So it depends on how big the final group is. If we have a dozen people, I think we probably would split for some of those meetings, um, and it also depends on the availability of the meetings that we have too, because often we find that there's a lot of different kinds of people that we want to meet with, and in order to pack that into a small space or a small amount of time, that sometimes it is helpful to split. But whether or not we would actually do that really, I think, depends on the meetings that we would have in the country itself and on the overall size of the final group. But that's something that we could talk about with each of the delegates.
Oh, I think we have lost Courtney, and hopefully she'll be able to join us back in momentarily. But as she was saying, we will definitely be able to coordinate with all of our delegates what their professional and personal interests are, to be able to align their specific interests with what some of the meetings might entail while in Tunisia. And let me move on to some of the other questions. We have one question on if the potential candidate needs to be a US citizen. I think it's very important to mention that Network 2020 is a global organization, and as such, we welcome people from the entire world, regardless of their citizenship, professional or personal background. And of course, this is one aspect that would, the only aspect that would need to be addressed prior to traveling to Tunisia is the necessity and the process, the logistical process for ensuring visas. For example, for US passport holders, there is no visa requirements for stays up to 90 days. Hi, Courtney. Great to have you back.
Thanks. How are we doing on questions?
Lastly, we just covered a question from one of our candidates. Do they need to be a US citizen?
Okay, great. Yes. All right. And you covered that one. Okay. And then I see, let's see, will meetings be arranged for every day, all day? What was that? Have we taken that one yet or not?
No, we have not.
Okay, great. So we have a great question. Will the meetings be arranged for every day, all day? Will we have some free time to experience the country and the unique culture in between meetings? That's a great question. And that's something that we started to build in particular into our, well, I guess we've built it into all the programs, but I think in Ukraine in particular, we really tried to build it in. So yes, while the focus is often on a lot of these meetings, and that's a really interesting way to experience the culture for sure. I know that one will not want to go to Tunisia and miss the amazing mosaics or miss going to Carthage. And so, yes, we would build in a lot of those really critical cultural heritage points for sure. I think that really is an important thing to do. And we would absolutely do that. Filip, do you want to add to that at all?
No, you answered the question perfectly. Thank you.
Great. And then we have a question of whether or not there is programming or intentional community building to build relationships between current and former alumni or delegates and the members of the broader Network 2020 community. That's a great question. I would say, for sure, what we usually try to do when we return from these programs is to have is we do try to do a briefing with the wider Network 2020 community where the delegates and the fellows share their experiences and findings. So that's certainly one way to connect with the wider Network 2020 community. In terms of the alumni, we haven't done that yet, but that is really a fantastic idea. And it's certainly one worth exploring. So yeah, really wonderful question.
Yeah, I'm just going to add there, we always try to foster a community of Network 2020s, both global and kind of US-based community members. So it's really, in essence, our entrepreneurial diplomacy program allows Network 2020 to create new avenues and new relationships. And we always try to nurture those relationships and continue to build bridges between not only the United States and Tunisia in this case example, but also between all of our delegates and whatever their personal backgrounds are, wherever they are located, and trying to really raise awareness between their own country and Tunisia in this case.
Thanks. And we have two questions, two technical questions. One, whether Canadian citizens need visas. That I do not know the answer to off the top of my head, but if you're a passport holder from another country, again, we need to look at that on a case-by-case basis and see what the see what the visa situation is. And we have a question: do all delegates fly from one city to Tunisia? No, that's a great question. So we want everybody to arrange, because we don't want to be in the business of trying to manage everybody's different busy schedules. So what we ask is that everybody meet in Tunis on a set day and time, and then that's when the trip begins. And so people would figure out how to best get there to suit their own needs, you know, particularly if people are coming internationally, or sometimes people want to tack on a trip before or after. And so we leave it to people to decide how to best get there on their own. Okay, so we have a question: if one has the time and means, will Network 2020 help arranging some more personal exploring of Tunisia before or after the group program? Yeah, that's a great question. I think at that point, because we would have so many contacts and suggestions, I think we would be ripe with suggestions for where to go and what to see. And so we could certainly help with making some contacts and suggestions on that front. Filip, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's always an amazing opportunity while you're in the country to extend your stay if your kind of personal obligations allow that. But it is kind of also including the previous question on the cultural exploration. I think it's such an important component. And if you do have the time and means to extend your stay, I think it also really kind of goes to demonstrate the importance of being able to expose yourself to some of the cultural experiences, because understanding the culture, history, language, and also the cuisine, and it really kind of adds significant value to be able to understand what are the main trends, why are they happening, and what might we see in the future. Yeah,
I stayed on my first trip when I went to Turkey. I actually extended a couple of days, and I remember sitting on the rooftop of an Istanbul hotel, and that was actually I wound up starting to draft an application for Fulbright grant actually during that time, and it was a Fulbright grant to Turkey, and I wound up returning there, and so that was sort of how I made use of my, or not totally how I made use of my extended stay, but that was one way in which I extended the stay and then made it extend even longer by returning to Turkey. So it really proved a foundational experience. A question over, are there any prohibited jobs that you would not want to list on a person's resume? Oh, that's a really interesting question. I mean, I could probably think of some jobs that maybe would not be good to be listed on a resume, but for the most part, I think almost everything would be okay. I mean, everyone has different experiences. In terms of like security, though, could it be, if someone had once, say, worked in the government or intelligence, would that be a prohibitor? I don't think so. The one question is if we're arranging meetings in Tunisia and if we're arranging meetings with government officials, I don't know what their own process is for vetting who's meeting with whom. And so, there could always be a chance that someone is flagged, maybe not being able to go to all meetings, but other than that, there's nothing that comes to mind. But if there's a personal situation that you would want to reach out about, please feel free to. We'd be happy to talk about that more. Let's see. We have Filip, is there anything that you want to take? We have an international student who's initially from Tunisia, and they're wondering if they can apply. who's currently studying in the US. Yes, you are welcome to apply. In fact, one of our participants on our Ukraine trip the last time was a young woman who was living and working in the US, but it was originally from Ukraine. And I think for her, she found it a tremendously rewarding experience to be able to see her country in a different light and sort of through a more one more analytical lens, and then two through one where there's just a range of meetings that she would not ordinarily get to have with people from her country. And so I think she found it to be quite rewarding. Let's see. Philip, do you want to take some of these?
So it maybe also add to that. I think it's an extremely valuable experience for one who's looking to advance their own professional career, especially if you want to focus on issues, challenges, opportunities pertaining to Tunisia and the region. It really is an amazing opportunity to create those relationships, build that network, and gain and develop those skill sets that you will need, that regardless of whether you want to work in the public or private sector, that allow you to better position yourself and to have something strong that validates your experience on whether it's your resume or doing any other kind of professional engagement opportunities. So we have one question on if we would share the resumes of our delegates with the host countries. So I think Courtney touched upon it already. What we will do is we collect the resumes of all of our delegates. And as such, as a group, we share the delegates' bios with all of those whom we are meeting with. So all of the participants within our meetings will have kind of a heads up on both the delegates' bios, because it's a very good opportunity for them to understand who are the individuals who they are meeting with, what might be a good topic to address with those specific individuals, especially as those located in Tunisia are also looking to create meaningful connections and networking opportunities, especially as Courtney also mentioned, thinking about raising awareness and kind of echoing their voices in the United States or other countries where our delegates come from.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and just to echo that, we don't usually send the CV directly, but we ask each participant to supply like a short bio. So that's usually what we share, is something that's in paragraph form. We're getting a bunch of really good questions. We have one wanting to know if a university could pay a stipend. That's a great question that kind of ties in with, you know, whether or not a company could pay a fee. That is up to your university, but often often there are pools of money or programs that one can find to support these kinds of activities. So I would recommend talking to a professor or an advisor or someone who's in a department that's related to, you know, Middle East, North Africa, and asking them, because often there can be pools of money. There will be a recording of this available. We'll put it up on our YouTube site after. So if anyone missed part of it or wants to share it with somebody who might be interested, please do. We have a question about whether or not there's 5G in Tunisia. I actually do not know the answer to that question. Philip, do you have any insight?
Yep. There is, and of course, as 5G is located in the United States as well, you might find pockets across the United States where there is not even 3G. So that's something that you have to be prepared for, of course.
And let's see, I think we're getting to the end. So we have one final question of, you know, why do you call it entrepreneurial diplomacy? Which is a great question. So in its original inception, we described the program as entrepreneurial because it sort of had this spirit of enterprise. It was the idea of innovation and enterprise that I think we wanted to capture with that name, particularly as it applies to people-to-people diplomacy, it's in private citizen diplomacy, and over time, as we've realized that there actually is a lot of potential in entrepreneurship that's emerging through many different societies, particularly what we've experienced with Southeast Europe and Ukraine. We've actually found that the business focus of the word carries a lot of weight as well, and is actually adds a nice double meaning there too. So I think we have gotten most of the questions. Thank you all for participating. Again, the application is up, it's live. If you have any questions while filling it out, please feel free to reach out to us. we have this recording. You will be sent a copy of it, I think 24 hours after, and it will be on our YouTube site. So please do share it around. And we hope to actually meet many of you in Tunisia. It would be really wonderful. So with that, thank you, Filip. Thank you, Brian, for making this possible. Thanks everyone for participating, and have a really wonderful evening. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.